Welcome to Halteres Presents, a brand agnostic interview podcast that seeks to objectively highlight the happenings within the world of diagnostics. And now, your hosts, Rich Thayer and Mickey Urdea.
Hello, this is Mickey Urdea, founding partner at Halteres Associates, and welcome to another episode in our series Halteres Presents. And today we have a bonus episode for you. We had an opportunity to record at the first ever Diagnostics Zone at the 2025 HLTH, or Health Conference. It was great to see diagnostics given such a spotlight at one of the premier health conferences in the world. And because of the Diagnostics Zone, we had an opportunity to interview two very interesting companies about their new diagnostic technologies. One was molecular testing labs, the other was OTO Fertility. From molecular testing labs, we had James York, their chief commercial officer, and from OTO Fertility, we were able to speak to their CEO, Caleb Evans. Molecular Testing Labs has a very interesting set of tailored menu items for specific market segments. We had a very good conversation about that. And OTO Fertility has been doing a lot of work in fertility markers and making it more accessible. And most recently, on January 6th, they announced the launch of the world's first wearable for predictive fertility, which is quite an interesting advancement in their technology. And now we hope you enjoyed these two interviews from Halteres Presents. Thanks for listening. Well, welcome to Halteres Presents. We're glad to have you here, and we're very excited to hear about your company, your technology, what differentiates you, and why you're excited about being here at the first Diagnostics Zone 2025.
Yeah, certainly. So thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here as well. I'm James York. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Molecular Testing Labs. So I'm focused on making markets in healthcare, especially around diagnostic testing. And so as a company, we have been focused on innovation as our access point for labs. And so if you think about healthcare in nature, it's big, it's massive, it doesn't change, it's not very agile, right? Which is something that this conference is looking to achieve, is agility in healthcare. For the most part, the incumbents of healthcare have always thought about labs as Quest and LabCorp. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. They're exceptional labs, and they're very good at what they do. But we're trying to move the access point to the home or to places that are traditionally considered non-clinical, because our belief is that all people should have access to diagnostics no matter what their situation or their circumstances are. And so if you can move the point in which the sample is collected to a more convenient location, then you can unlock preventative healthcare, unlock chronic disease management, unlock access to just traditional routine tests every day that people take in a discreet, kind of destigmatized way. So as far as like why I'm happy to be here and why Diagnostic Zone means a lot to me is I think health is a consolidation of like-minded people thinking about how to change the access point to healthcare in general. So that lines up very well with our mission, right? I think of this conference as consumerizing healthcare, which is, pretty hard to define, but in general, we're trying to change the access point in diagnostics from patients to consumers, which just means to me upstream. And so the fact that there is a diagnostic zone indicates that the health community is paying attention to how to leverage diagnostics in a bigger, broader way to access patients and activate them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we see companies like Exact Sciences with Cologuard. It's incredible what they've done to educate the consumer about that. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing. What kind of samples, what kind of tests are being deployed?
Yeah, Cologuard is an amazing company. And I know that they got their FDA clearance in 2014. In 2016, all of a sudden you have a talking box that is adding a little bit of humor and lightness to a pretty heavy situation, colorectal cancer screening. So for us, we do some colorectal cancer screen testing, but we're focused on taking the most commonly prescribed labs like HbA1c, lipids, triglycerides, HIV, STI, you name it. And we're focused on broad health indications that typically have barriers or stigmatization around them. And so in general terms, healthcare has been accessed through health benefits. And we want to just recognize that that's not accessible for everyone, right? So health plans and traditional kind of payer concepts have really high copays and deductibles. Most patients don't understand what the cost of care or the cost of engagement is going to be for them. And so we're focused on finding the patient when they're consumer status that have an idea that they want to be a decision maker in their own care journey. They want to not necessarily talk to someone face to face about why they might need testing. Mm-hmm. Examples of that would be chronic fatigue, high risk sexual encounters, weight gain, things like that people don't necessarily feel comfortable talking to people. You don't necessarily know how much it's going to cost you to go to the doctor, to get a lab order, to go to the lab and then get a result. And so if we can make that more accessible to consumers, then they can become a decision maker in their care earlier in their journey. And ideally, like if we do that well, then we prevent the train wrecks of healthcare, like the really severe chronic disease that leads to hospitalization and things like that.
And it's often very convenient for them to go to a clinic. You know, if they take time off of work or soccer mom can't be with their kids, you know, that's going to be very difficult too.
That's right. So if we think about, most people get their benefits through their employer. If they're on a commercial plan, they're getting their benefits through their employer, and their employer does not want them to take time off of work to go into the doctor's office, into a lab, take time off work to do that whole paradigm, I guess. In our case, we can send a collection kit to the employer's home, let them take their sample in the morning, eat their bacon and eggs, and go to work. And so it is more convenient. It's fee transparent because it's contained in one cost. You know exactly what the encounter is going to cost you, from the doctor order to the lab reporting, etc.
Yeah.
So we think we have a great benefit for people that are accessing healthcare in traditional ways. If you're on a state or federally funded program, the same logic applies. We want people to be productive. We want to catch chronic disease and infections at a much earlier stage. You know, I go to conferences all year long, and there's a heightened sense of concern in the market right now, where healthcare is just getting so expensive, and the incumbents in healthcare are really talking about how to disrupt and how to be innovative, but they're also talking about shareholder value. And I can't even imagine trying to navigate that puzzle. It's awful. Health is a chance to reset some of that. It's not trying to replace, it's not necessarily trying to disrupt or be transformative, but health gives us an opportunity to think about consumer behaviors. And so at this conference, we get to think more about concepts like patient engagement, patient nurturing, patient activation, and getting them to care about the things before their check engine light comes on. Like when you think about going back to, you know, the cost of care, there has to be some resets that occur. And some of those resets are to figure out this consumer driven market and make it meaningful and making it accessible to consumers so that they can take part in their healthcare earlier.
Right. And it's exciting that there are so many organizations here which have done a great job of convincing a consumer to use their products, particularly pharma. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I'm rarely in a meeting where both pharma and diagnostics are together at the same time.
I know. And pharma is one of the most disruptive areas of healthcare right now, where they're starting to think about how to reduce cost and cut out middlemen. And so you see pharma coming to the market right now on direct-to-consumer basis. We've seen AbbVie, we've seen Amgen, we've seen Roche. Lilly Direct is one. I can anticipate there's going to be many more. Well, what are they doing? They're trying to advertise direct to the consumer, not patient, right? Consumer. They're trying to get uptake on their medication earlier, and without some of the middle layers of cost in the healthcare system. So check this out. What drives all of that uptake? It's a lab test. And so a patient has to know what their lab result is before they can be considered for, you know, linkage to care and uptake on the medication that the pharmas are trying to connect their patients to.
Right.
And so one of the coolest things, and this really gets me fired up for diagnostics, especially in the area that we're focused on, is we can send out a kit to someone's home so that they can do an A1C test or a lipoprotein A test, or there's HPV test coming to market. There's the first approved FDA cleared Abbott Simply Collect test, which is a 4-plex test for STIs. All of these become the top of the funnel for the patient and for the pharma company so that they can activate the patient, get them a result that they need, and then get them on the medications that they need to create wellness.
And their clinical trials too. More and more, we're seeing home testing during clinical trials instead of sending things to a laboratory, which is pretty exciting.
It is, yeah. I was talking to a big pharma company about a month ago, and they said at some point we will not call them decentralized trials anymore. We'll just call them trials. And so I think that's a really clever way to just say, because of the role of diagnostics being the flywheel and what diagnostics can do in creating value in trials, we can get more diverse populations, subset populations that weren't approachable in the past. So, when you're watching the Super Bowl ads and it says it may cause diarrhea, upset stomach, and suicidal tendencies, like we want to prevent those things, right? I know pharma does for sure. And so the better subset population diversity that we can have in the trial represented, the more likely it is to make sure that we're finding which of those subset populations will have an adverse event to the drug, and then therefore create a better medicine and better promise for good outcomes with the medicine.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, James, thanks so much for joining us, and I was very excited to talk with you, and I wish you all the luck.
I cannot thank you enough for having me on this podcast. I think education and awareness are big components for what we're trying to push, and so the more people that hear this message, the better off we are.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Well, welcome to the Diagnostics Zone here in Las Vegas.
Thanks,
and
Mickey.
Please tell us a little bit about yourself,
Yeah.
your company, what differentiates you,
Sure.
and why it's important for you to be here.
Yeah, I know. Caleb Evans, born and raised Canadian. I come from a long line of healthcare professionals. So my dad was an obstetrician. My grandfather was as well. Grandfather, at the end of his career, was the head of University of Calgary Medical School. And it'd always been part of the family. And somehow I got connected into business. We had, right after university, I got involved in an EMR software company, which was really helping physicians transition from old way of charting into cloud-based and electronic, which was one of the first of its kind, and then sold that company and then got into helping other companies grow. And one of those companies was a fertility company. And it was fascinating to see because for me, seeing a company, which was fertility, doctors saying, I want to add more clinics, was completely the opposite of my experience with physicians. Like if you ask doctors, hey, you should add more patients, more admin, more operating costs, more brick and mortar locations, they would all be, it was like the opposite of what they would want. So it was fascinating to see an industry that was pursuing that model. And what you started to find out is that doctors in the fertility industry don't own their practices. It's private equity groups or venture capitalists or business owners that are CEOs on the business side that are trying to add brick and mortar. So it was an interesting look into the world. And then you started to see what else happened under the surface, which was the cost attached to couples who were infertile. You know, the average is somewhere $60,000 to $80,000. Couples are trying, before they go see a reproductive endocrinologist, are trying for 3 years on average before they go see a doctor. And then they're trying on average in treatment for 3 years for one child if they're successful. Every couple usually goes to 3 or 4 cycles on average. And the cost of that cycle is probably $25,000. So it's a huge opportunity, at least I thought, to be able to see if there was a way to provide something to couples while they were going through that. And that's where we came up with OTO Fertility. I'm the CEO and founder of that company. And what we do diagnostically is we provide an at-home assessment, macro system, so giving an insight into your cardiology, your central nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, energy supply, and hormonal regulation. So it'd be like seeing your cardiologist, your endocrinologist, your neurologist. And we have 16 predictive biomarkers of outcome. So we can tell you to an 85% probability whether or not you're going to conceive going through an IVF cycle, which is 2.5 times the current standard of care when it comes to treatment. So that's what I do. That's our diagnostic test. And
very interesting. So is that bringing down the cost as well by doing that?
Correct. Yeah. So, overall, when you think about this from a lifetime of treatment perspective, if you're under 35, the probability of success is about 55%, and then it decreases by age kind of with each, window from a biology perspective. And time to pregnancy is the big one, right? Right now it's on average 3 years from when you go see a reproductive endocrinologist. If you stayed on OTO Fertility and we're diagnosing at home, because we have two aspects of our stream from a product perspective. The one side is that predictive probability side, where couples can actually track what's happening on their own biology. They can see what's working with them or what's working against them in terms of conception. The other thing that we do is with AI is we give generated optimization solutions. Because when you think about fertility largely, there are biomarkers that we know. Age, AMH, BMI, all contribute to whether or not you're going to be successful. You can't control those really. You could argue with me that, you can change BMI, and for sure there are a lot of ways you can do that. The problem with BMI, at least within the research, is that when BMI goes up, pregnancy rates drop. But then when BMI comes down, pregnancy rates don't naturally increase. So there's something happening biologically that is contributing to conception rates that may or may not be attached to BMI. Where our markers that couples are getting from a biology perspective are all things that they can control. They're all things that they can track. They have agency, right? To be able to move the needle measurably and decrease that time to pregnancy. So we're seeing couples that are now on average 3 years be on average 9 to 12 months. So the costs are coming down, not just from a financial perspective, but also from an emotional cost, an emotional burden, the opportunity cost, right? Because as you think about this from a family perspective, the opportunity cost is really how many kids can I have, right? If you're starting to conceive when, 30, 40 years ago, women and families were having kids in their early 20s, that's changed. Now the average to start having a family is 32, 33. So you think if I start at 32, 33, and then I try for 3 years, and then I get diagnosed as infertile, I go see a reproductive endocrinologist at 35, then I'm 3 years and I'm 38 having my first, that looks different, right? You're starting to think about, well, now I'm maybe only going to have one more if I can do it. So there's that opportunity cost that we don't always talk about when it comes to families,
Right.
that we're really trying to address here.
Right. Does the frequency of testing and or the biomarkers make it possible to know the right timing?
Totally. Yeah. So we give for a female, and we have a male side of this as well, which is, we were just on the path to parenthood talking about male side of infertility. And when you think about it overall, you have 10% of couples that are diagnosed infertile, there's something medically wrong. 30% female factor, age diminished reserve. 30% male factor, motility, mobility. 30% broadly, a doctor's just going to look at you and say, I have no idea. It's completely unexplained. So when you think about what we provide is you do this test and you get a window, and there's 3 specific windows. You have your optimal zone, which is the best place to be in terms of the likely outcome. You have a preparatory zone, which is you're in the middle, and you have a recovery zone. So as you start to look at that from a decision-making perspective, you can start to time treatment relative to optimal zone and optimizing your chances from an outcome perspective.
Right.
So you get that sense of control back into the hands of the couple, which I think is really the magical part of this, right? Building a family is supposed to be magical. It's supposed to be intimate. It's supposed to be with you and your partner, without, needles, and which is a great technology because there are couples that need those things. But can we optimize it through a process where the couple has control and agency to be able to make that decision?
Are you going to be able to measure the greater likelihood of success with the way you're doing this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And that's been our research. And so, the things that we've done over the last 4 years, the history of the technology that we have actually originated 40 years ago in space medicine. And it was a joint venture between NASA and the former Soviet Union on predicting the likelihood of space travel and its overall biological toll on astronauts. They needed a way non-invasively to be able to track those things. And so we've subsequently taken it into the fertility space to be able to give that predictive outcome, that probability of success that's now exponentially higher than that current standard of care in a really easy, non-invasive, at-home diagnostic space.
Now, there's an aspect of NASA contributions to the public that I've never heard before.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah. No, it's
Weird Tang and things like that.
That's right. That's right. And there's lots of great technologies that have come out of that investment, and we live it without knowing what those are day in and day out, right?
Yeah.
So we've had other aspects in terms of what we've done from a predictive perspective, but this is a key area of interest for lots of people, right? Like I think, generally speaking, there are 3 dreams that people have for their lives, right? When you think about yourself growing up as a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old, you probably think, what am I going to do when I grow up, right? Is it going to be an athlete or an astronaut or a physician in some ways? The other dream that you're probably going to have is, who am I going to spend that life with, right? And then the next dream you have is, how many kids am I going to have with the person after I've got this career that's going to provide for all of these things?
Right.
And when one of those things don't happen, it's incredibly painful.
Right.
And if you've got the first 2 and you're now, hey, we've done everything that we thought we were supposed to do, and now we're trying to build a family, that's when it becomes a key issue. And, we're not even talking about some policy things or birth rates globally, which are in developed countries now falling well below sustained, levels in terms of the actual kids per couple.
Yeah.
So there's lots of things that you want to start to look at and address when it comes to helping couples have babies. And this for sure is a meaningful approach. And, what we're trying to do at OTO Fertility for sure.
Are you seeing the possibility of using wearables now?
So our hardware device is an actual wearable. Yeah. So it's right now it's a chest strap, and it's a last conversion into a bracelet. And so you'll be able to just have it on, and this will be a very easy way for an individual to get this information. And that's, where we see this moving from a company perspective.
A lot of the people that listen to our podcast are diagnostics people.
Yeah.
They'd be curious, what are the markers that you're looking at? Some of the key ones, and what sort of information?
We do a medical grade ECG and EEG, and then we track the macro systems of your cardiac system, your central nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, your energy supply, and hormonal regulation. And so within those 5 macro systems, we track 50 plus different measurements across those things that give us insight into the overall function, and then how that now translates into reproductive health. Has broad application to lots of other places from an at-home diagnostic as well. But at least from our company's perspective, really focusing on this reproductive health space for couples, family building.
But you're marking hormone levels, or you're marking other things that are indicative of hormone levels?
That's right. So it's a macro look at what's controlling or impacting your hormone levels. So you can get that micro of like, I'll track cortisol or estradiol or progesterone, but what's actually impacting the production of those hormones and its release into your system. And that's what we're tracking overall. Everything that we're doing from a system perspective diagnostically is measuring your body's ability to regulate. And how far are you away from regulation, which is, when we say regulate, we're really talking about homeostasis, the natural, normal place that your function is best. We measure how far you are away. And the further you are away, the longer and more potential major complications you're going to have from a biology perspective. Like, conceivably, every healthcare issue is boiled down into your body's ability to regulate. And if you can't regulate, that's where you start to see all of these other things really pop up. And it's different for every individual, right? Like my inability to regulate from a homeostasis perspective would look different than if we continued and it become chronic than yours, Mickey, in terms of what it would manifest as. Right. So for this couple, or the couple who are infertile, it could be that their body's not regulating in the way that it should, and now it's leading to this consequence.
Are there specific disease states that alter fertility, and do you work with people and their physicians to help deal with that?
Yeah, so our model is really around integrating into the clinic practice and providing doctors immediate insight into at home what's happening from a physiology perspective. So it's those additional biomarkers that they don't see. So from a disease state perspective, we know that those things are going to control and impact your ability to conceive, right? Like, your body is fighting something, right? And when it starts to fight something, it pulls resource from other places. And so we monitor and measure that. And then we can see those things proactively and then give really precise individual recommendations to help optimize for your state. And that's the real unique part, is it's precise, it's individualized. It's not a generic, okay, you're infertile. It's what's happening to your body and what are you trying to fight against, and what can we give you from a recommendation perspective to help optimize that. So that's really where we try and focus on. Yeah.
So is it appropriate to say, basically, if a person is not well, they're not going to be fertile?
It would make it harder.
Make it harder.
Yeah. So it's not so much that they're going to be infertile. It's just they're and again, it's broad from a generalization perspective.
Yeah.
Just like when we look at our couples who are coming through it, if you're in the lowest zone, it doesn't mean that you won't get pregnant, right? It just means that it's harder to get pregnant. And so you need some additional interventions to be able to support that. And you need precise interventions for you individually on that side.
It's not yes, no, it's a continuum.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's true of fertility. I mean, when you look at it broadly, it is an ongoing continuum from fertility perspective, because you could talk, and at times we make that error that we only think it's female specific, but there's another partner involved, right? And the female in 1 month may be really fertile, but the male may be struggling. And so there's this continuum of constant evolution, month over month over month, where these things are not fixed. They're not static.
Right. It's amazing what we're learning with continuous monitoring of almost everything.
That's right. That's right. The insights. I mean, one of the things that we've seen very interestingly in our research, which has prompted additional research on our side, is the incidence of previously undiagnosed cardiac issues in infertile women. We're seeing about 5 to 7% of the population have significant cardiac disturbances through treatment and that had been previously undiagnosed, where you're starting to learn something different about the body just because you are monitoring. And oftentimes, and we do know, I mean, this is what research has shown us, is that women who undergo infertility treatment are at a higher risk of long-term cardiac issues, like down the road. And those cardiac issues don't leave. They stay with them. So, just by monitoring, we're able to identify something different and maybe unique, and maybe what's perhaps a part of this, that we could get early interventions proactively to support, knowing that this could be a potential risk factor. So, to your point around diagnostics, the more that we can proactively take it from having to go see a clinician, going to see a doctor, going to pay for that procedure, where you can get that insight at home to be able to flag that sooner so that you can navigate those decisions as an individual.
Right. It's very inconvenient for people to go, in the middle of the day to see clinician.
Middle of the day, and also, access, right? Like how close is that, MRI? How close is that endocrinologist, right? All of those things. In Canada as well, like we have a different healthcare system than the US, but, it's waitless. Right? Like how long is it going to take to get into this to go see that? And those are things that, start to put a lot of pressure onto our public healthcare systems when we think about how can we support proactively that migration to give people that information sooner so they can get on it and start acting.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Caleb. That was really very interesting, and I think our audience is going to enjoy hearing about it. So
I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks again, and
good luck with OTO Fertility.
OTO Fertility, yeah. As interest, we're on the web, autofertility.com. If people want to check us out online and reach out, we'd love to be in touch.
Excellent. Thanks.
Thank you.
Halteres Presents is produced by Halteres Associates, a US-based bioscience consultancy that provides strategic and tactical services in the areas of diagnostics, medical devices, and life science research to clients of all sizes. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the episode are solely those of the individuals involved, and Halteres Associates is not responsible for any errors or omissions, or for the results obtained from the use of this information. The information provided in this episode is for informational or educational purposes only, and is not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Halteres Associates would like to say thank you to this episode's guest or guests, and thank you for listening to this episode of Halteres Presents.